All right, so get this, right? Have you ever heard of this idea of persuasion?
Pre-suasion.
Yeah, persuasion. It's like, okay, we've all heard of persuasion, right?
Yeah.
But this is like next level. It's not just about what you say to get your point across. It's this wild idea that what really matters is what you get people to focus on before you even say it.
Oh, interesting. So it's like setting the stage, creating the right atmosphere for your message to land.
Exactly. You've got it. And today we're diving deep into this, unpacking Robert Cialdini's book, Pre-Suasion, which really digs into this hidden layer of influence.
Cialdini, yeah, he's the OG of influence, right?
Well, yeah.
Influence, the psychology of persuasion.
Yeah.
That's the one.
And this book, Pre-Suasion, it's like he took all that knowledge, all those years of research, and went even deeper. And honestly, some of the things he found are mind-blowing, absolutely mind-blowing.
Well, for anyone who's read Influence, I mean, that book's practically a Bible for understanding human behavior.
Hmm.
But this persuasion thing, it's like the next level of the game, right? It's about understanding these subtle, almost invisible mechanisms that shape our decisions before we even realize what's happening.
Okay, so Cialdini, he kicks things off with this idea, right? Channeled attention equals shifted behavior. Basically, whatever we focus our attention on, it becomes more important in our minds, and that influences how we behave.
It's like our brains have this limited amount of attention to
Yeah.
give,
Yes.
and whatever we shine that spotlight on, it just gets amplified. You ever buy a new car and then all of a sudden you see that same car everywhere you go?
Oh, yeah, all the time.
It's not that everyone suddenly bought the same car as you, right? It's that your brain's decided that information, that specific car is important now, so it's prioritizing it. It's filtering the world through that lens.
And that leads us to this wild study Cialdini talks about. It involved Canadian college students. Okay, are you ready for this? Right before these students get this joined, a cult.
A cult. Whoa.
A cult. They were asked about how happy or unhappy they were feeling at that moment. Simple question, right?
Seems harmless enough, but I bet it wasn't so harmless, was it?
Not even close. Cialdini found that the students who were asked about their unhappiness were way more likely to join the cult afterwards. Just by directing their attention to negative emotions right before the whole cult pitch, those students became way more susceptible to the message. It's crazy how easily our focus can be manipulated.
That is wild. But okay, it's not just about cults, right? This applies to everyday life too.
Yeah.
Think about like banner ads online. We might think we're totally ignoring them, but they're always there, right? Like lurking in our peripheral vision. And they're subtly influencing us, whether we realize it or not. It's like we're constantly being persuaded without even knowing it.
It's like subliminal messaging almost.
Right, exactly. And that brings us to this whole other concept. Cialdini talks about the geography of influence. Basically, our surroundings, even little tiny details we might not even notice, they can all impact our decisions.
Okay, so give me an example of this. How can our surroundings really influence us like that?
Okay, so Cialdini talks about this workplace study, right? And they found that the most successful incentive programs, the ones that really got people motivated, they were designed in centrally located rooms.
Really? Just the location of the room made that much of a difference. Why, though?
It's all about associations. Our brains are constantly making connections, even if we're not aware of it. So consciously or unconsciously, we link those centrally located rooms with like importance or success.
It's kind of like how we associate certain colors with specific emotions or brands, right?
Yeah, exactly. Think about it. There was this study where people looked at pictures of fluffy clouds, and afterwards, they were more likely to choose comfier furniture. Our brains just make these weird connections without even asking us.
So to be a more persuasive person, you've got to think about the environment you're in, like even down to the little details. That's wild.
It's not just about what you're saying. It's about setting the stage, creating an experience that aligns with your message.
This is blowing my mind. And wait, it gets even crazier. Cialdini found that even just using a single word can totally change how persuasive you are.
Oh, is this about his research on the word you?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's it. So he found that when you use the word you, like talking directly to the person, it was way more effective than talking about people in general, like way more persuasive.
It's like that old saying, people don't care what you know until they know that you care. Using you makes it personal. It tells the other person, hey, I'm talking to you specifically. This matters to you.
Exactly. He uses this example of a campaign called Pit Stop. And just by changing the wording to use you more, they saw a huge jump in how effective it was. It's such a small tweak, but it makes a huge difference. Use you. It works.
It's a powerful reminder that even the smallest details in communication can have a huge impact. But hold on, because we haven't even scratched the surface yet. Persuasion goes way beyond just words. Cialdini, he found that music plays a huge role too.
Wait, really? Music. Tell me more about that.
So get this. Cialdini found that a whopping 80% of contemporary songs are about romance. And he connects that to why young women might find musicians more attractive.
Oh, wow. So you're telling me all those love songs on the radio could actually be influencing who we're attracted to?
It's definitely a possibility, right? But the bigger point here is that music, it bypasses our rational mind and speaks directly to our emotions. It's powerful stuff.
So what you're saying is music is like this secret weapon of persuasion.
Exactly. And it's not just music either. Cialdini found that even things like mimicry, how we naturally copy the people we like.
Yeah, like mirroring their body language.
Exactly. Or even just doing things in sync with someone, like tapping our fingers at the same time can create this feeling of unity. And when we feel connected to someone, we're much more likely to be persuaded by them.
We're more open to their ideas.
Yeah.
Right? Like that study Cialdini talked about where people who tap their fingers in sync, such a simple thing, they were way more likely to help each other later on, even if it meant making a sacrifice.
It's like that shared action, that little moment of synchrony, it created a bond that made them more willing to go out of their way for each other. It's fascinating how these tiny things can have such a big impact.
This is all so fascinating. We've covered so much already. Attention, environment, you, music, mimicry. Where do we even go from here?
Well, all this talk about influence, it begs the question, are these techniques always used for good? Or can they be used to manipulate people?
That's a great question, and one I know a lot of our listeners are probably thinking about. Okay, so we're back, and we've been talking about all these fascinating ways that persuasion works, right?
Yeah.
But it does kind of feel like we're wading into, like, ethically murky waters here. I
Yep.
mean, these techniques are powerful, but can't they be used to manipulate people without them even realizing it?
That's the big question, right? And to Cialdini's credit, he actually dedicates a big chunk of Pre-Suasion to talking about these very ethical concerns.
Because nobody wants to feel like they're being tricked or pressured into something.
Mhm. Exactly. And Cialdini's very clear that ethical persuasion, it's all about building trust. It's not about exploiting loopholes or using sneaky tactics.
So it's more about creating a genuine connection with the other person, a foundation of mutual respect.
Exactly. And to prove his point, Cialdini talks about all these companies that initially found success using, like, shady tactics, being manipulative, not being upfront with their customers. And what happened?
What happened? Tell me.
Well, their dishonesty was exposed, people lost trust, and their businesses tanked. It just goes to show that authenticity, integrity, those things are way more persuasive in the long run than any kind of, like, quick fix or trickery.
So it's about playing the long game, building real relationships, and being genuine.
Exactly. And that brings us to one of Cialdini's most interesting concepts in the book, this idea that we're all palm readers, in a sense.
Okay, now you've got to explain that one because I have no idea what you mean. Palm readers. How?
Well, think about it like this. Just like a palm reader looks at the lines on your hand to, gain insights into your past, present, future, we all leave these lines of influence behind us as we go through the world.
So, like, our actions, our words, they all have this ripple effect, influencing the people around us, even if we don't realize it.
Exactly. It's often happening below the level of conscious awareness. It's a powerful reminder that even our smallest actions can have unintended consequences.
Wow. It really makes you think about the kind of influence you're putting out there, doesn't it?
It really does. And that awareness, that's key to becoming a more ethical and effective persuader, right? We've got to be mindful of the cues we're sending, both intentionally and unintentionally. We've got to create environments that encourage positive choices.
And Cialdini calls these environments persuasive geographies, right? The idea that where we are physically and mentally can actually shape our decisions.
Exactly. And he talks about this fascinating study about, of all things, physicians, brilliant minds, right? But notoriously resistant to outside influence.
Oh, I can imagine. Doctors, they know their stuff. So how do you even begin to influence them?
Well, researchers found that just by placing a simple sign in patient rooms, reminding doctors about the importance of hand washing, basic hygiene, it actually dramatically increased how often they wash their hands.
Wait, seriously, just a sign? That's crazy.
It's amazing, right? It just shows how powerful those subtle environmental cues can be. They work as these persuasive prompts, nudging us towards certain behaviors without us even realizing it.
So if we're more aware of our surroundings, we can actually influence our own behavior and the behavior of others.
Absolutely. And that leads us to another important aspect of ethical persuasion, transparency.
Okay, transparency. I like the sound of that. Tell me more.
It's about being upfront about your intentions. Cialdini, he's very clear that truly ethical persuasion, it's not about hiding your agenda. It's about being open and honest about what you're trying to achieve and why. When you're transparent, you build trust, and that creates a foundation for genuine connection and persuasion.
It makes sense when you put it like that.
Yeah.
So it's not about manipulating people into doing what you want. It's about creating an environment of, like, open communication,
Hmm.
where you can share your ideas and influence decisions in a way that benefits everyone involved.
Exactly. It's about finding that sweet spot where your goals align with the needs and values of others. And when you do that, when you get that right, you create those win-win situations that lead to real, lasting, positive change.
That's really powerful. Okay, so we've talked about ethics, transparency, creating those persuasive environments. What else do we need to know about actually using persuasion effectively?
Well, one thing that's absolutely crucial is understanding the power of emotion. Cialdini's research shows that we are way, way more persuaded by messages that resonate with us on an emotional level. It's not just about logic and reason, it's about tapping into those feelings and desires that really drive our decisions.
Because at the end of the day, we're humans, not robots.
Right.
Our emotions play a huge part in how we see the world and make choices.
Exactly. So if you want to be a truly persuasive communicator, you have to figure out how to connect with people on an emotional level. You need to find the right stories, the right images, the right metaphors, things that will resonate with their hearts as well as their minds.
So how do we actually do that? How do we find those emotional hooks that make a message memorable and persuasive?
Well, that's a great question, and one we'll be diving into right after the break, so stay tuned.
All right, so we're back. And we've been on this incredible journey, haven't we? Exploring this whole world of persuasion. I mean, we've talked about attention, the environment you're in, the power of the word you, music, even mimicry. But now, how do we actually use this stuff? How do we become more persuasive in our own lives without, feeling manipulative?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And luckily, Cialdini, he doesn't just drop all this knowledge on us and then just like run away. He actually gives us a roadmap for what he calls post-suasion. Basically, it's what you do after the initial message to make your influence last.
Okay, so it's like, how do you make it stick?
Exactly. And one of the most important strategies, unity, that feeling of we're in this together. Remember that study with the finger tapping?
Oh yeah, the one where people who tap their fingers in sync were more likely to help each other out later.
That's the one. It shows that even simple acts of unity can have a huge impact. And the great thing is, there are so many ways to create that sense of togetherness, right?
Mhm.
Shared experiences, common goals, even the language we use. When you can tap into that feeling of belonging, it's incredibly powerful.
It's like we're hardwired to be more receptive to people we feel connected to. Makes sense, right?
Absolutely. And ultimately, that's what persuasion is all about, creating a real, lasting impact that benefits everyone, using these subtle techniques to nudge people toward positive change.
Whether it's like making healthier choices or just seeing the world in a new way.
Exactly. And it all starts with awareness, with understanding these subtle forces that shape our choices. So, as we wrap up our deep dive here, the big takeaway for me is this: it's not about manipulation, it's about using these tools ethically and responsibly to become more mindful communicators.
I love that. And if you're listening and you're as fascinated by this as we are, definitely check out Cialdini's book, Pre-Suasion. It'll change how you see the world.
It really will.
And on that note, until next time, keep those minds curious, folks. And remember, even the smallest interactions can have a big impact, so choose your influence wisely.